to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 26.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your host, Don Cardenas. I was informed by my lovely wife, who, for some inexplicable reason, has started listening to this podcast and informed me that I have not introduced myself, and that's probably a thing I should do. What is not inexplicable is why you are listening to this episode, because I know, and you are here because of my guest, the writer, musician, and coffee company CCO, Jono Diener. Jono not only is passionate about all those things I just mentioned, but he's also really good at them as well. From his band's Baggage and the Swellers, to his stories and the A Comic for Flint and maybe someday anthologies, and the awesome creative direction he brings to the ROOTLESS Coffee Company, Jono brings a great deal of passion and skill that cannot be called anything short of stellar. We have a great talk about his life as a musician, what led him to comics and coffee making, and a bunch more. So, enough said, let's get to the man, Jono Diener. Alright, Jono, before anything happens right now, when I first asked you to be on the podcast, you hit me up with a little piece of information that has just been taking up a lot of residence in my brain, and I just need to ask this question so you can tell me the story, and I can just move on with my life and the rest of this interview. So you rode in a van with the bass player from MAYHEM.
Yes. So it's one of the weirdest moments. So to put it in perspective, my band, the Swellers, we were on an Australian tour called Soundwave. And essentially what they do is they get a handful of bands from literally every genre and they just throw them on a festival lineup, and you do like 6 shows. All the bands stay in the same hotels. It is the most bizarre and eclectic group of people ever. So to put it in perspective, earlier that day, there was a photo opportunity where you could get a photo with a massive, I don't remember if it was a python or it was just a huge snake. And I have a photo of me posing with this massive, like 15-foot snake. And Jay Weinberg, who plays in Slipknot now, was like taking the photo for me. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? So that puts in perspective how bizarre the thing was. So that night we played our show. We were also having to play during Fall Out Boy, Smashing Pumpkins, and Slipknot at the same time every single night. So we had like barely anyone watch us, even though it was like a quote unquote perfect situation, right? We're like, whoa, we get to be here with these big bands. Oh, we have to play against the big bands. So we're all like wiped out and we're like, oh, all right, let's go back to the hotel, wherever it is. And then this guy walks up to me, and like me specifically, and he looks at me and goes, is it okay if Necro Butcher rides with you? And I was like, Mayhem? And he's like, yes. Is it okay? I'm like, oh yeah, it's super okay. He's like, okay, this is Necro Butcher. And he's like, hello. And all of us are like, oh. So we're all freaking out and stuff. So it's like all of us like young asshole American kids just like, we're going to go like swear super loud in the hotel, blah, blah, blah. And this guy is just sitting with like perfect posture and he like looks like he could stab anyone at any time. And we're like, so you having like fun? Like, everything good with you, man? And we just started like asking him all these annoyingly like positive questions. Like, so how's it going, man? Like, you just having a fun time? He's like, yes, it is very lovely in Australia. We're like, I'm pretending that he speaks like a Dracula. I really don't remember what he sounds like, but I just remember, we got a good, it was like a 15-minute ride with this dude who probably hated all of us, but I don't know if he actually has feelings or not. So yeah, it was a wonderful moment of my life. And for those who don't know, Mayhem is the Norwegian black metal band where I believe the singer committed suicide, and then the rest of the band ate his brain and made like necklaces out of his skull and stuff. Yes. And then they used it for a photo, or it was their album cover.
Yeah, an album cover. And didn't I believe they made a movie about them with Rory Culkin?
Uh
I want to say Anton Corbijn made the movie.
there was like something. There was some documentary. At least I know. I don't know if it was the same thing. It was like Masters of the Night or something like that. That's super wrong, but that's my first guess.
I think I could be wrong that I'm thinking of the wrong band, but yeah, that's you told me that, and I'm just like, that's got to be such an odd experience because so many of these like, super dark metal guys, you know, especially these days and the social media and all that, it's like they're just like chill guys, and they're just like, yeah, I think about all this horrific, terrible stuff, but but those guys in Mayhem, those were not super chill guys.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like I've had my fair share of like playing with like famous like pop punk bands and stuff like the Queers back in the day, and like there's always like a revolving lineup in those bands too, which makes it way funnier. So it's
Yeah.
like what do you do? Oh, I'm the bass player of this, and I'm always like, are you, or are you like the guy that's available for this tour? Because I kind of think that's what it is. So you never know when you're like talking to someone, but if I remember correctly, Necro Butcher was in Mayhem for a very long time. So that's my cool claim to fame.
I always like seeing like these lineups for those like overseas festivals where it's just like the craziest mishmash of just genres and groups, and it's like those kind of have to be kind of fun to attend at the very least, because it's like, well, it's just gonna be such a weird mix of crowds. Like, who's gonna see Slipknot and
But there's this like bizarre overlap where it's like, do you listen to music? You'll love this,
Yeah.
And then like I feel like if you get into the more like niche genres or whatever, like we played before or after this band called Butcher Babies every single day, and it was these two like Suicide Girls looking vocalists,
Yeah.
and they would just like get really close to these like greasy sweaty dudes' faces and like scream, and it was like insane. And then we're like, here's emotional pop punk, guys. so yeah, it's a trip, but like I feel like there's this, especially outside of the US, where there's just people who appreciate music and they don't give a shit about anything else. So like we're so picky with everything. Like, oh, they played with them, I'm not going. Meanwhile, we did I guess it wasn't that great, like a weird lineup, but it was like AFI, Bouncing Souls, Story of the Year, Swellers, Sum 41, and someone else in Europe. And like even the like cool crust punk kids love Sum 41. Like it wasn't like a guilty pleasure. And I remember like seeing like a kid in like a Leftover Crack shirt, and I'm like, whoa, dude, what's up? And he's like, I love these bands so much. And I'm like, really? Like the Fat Lip guys are like, okay, whatever. So yeah, it's it's the whole like removal of the guilty pleasure thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it's taking some hold in America for the most part, at least with the latest generation, where it's like we're just all exposed to so much because, despite the name of this podcast and, how much I do love metal, like I'm listening to so much other things and none of it I would consider a guilty pleasure. It's just, whatever I'm digging at the moment. And so I really I really wish America would kind of start like, adopting some of those things, because like a perfect bill for me would be to just like Tegan and Sarah opening up for like Gojira, and then maybe we'll have like some sort of like rotating opening band with some like different synthwave artists or something like that, like Dance with the Dead or something like that.
but there's like this cool crossover that happens with that kind of stuff too. So like,
definitely.
Like Lord recently took out Run the Jewels, and there's like these certain things that like shouldn't make sense, but like sometimes they'll have like the hipster crossover. So like Trash Talk was a big one where they would somehow be like, they're just like 35-second crazy thrash songs, and then out of nowhere, like all these like super hip fashionista people got into them, and I don't know how to explain it, but it was just like this cool like LA thing or whatever. So that band started playing with all these random bands that don't make any sense. Or like there's, let's say, like pop artists that are rooted in a punk background or whatever background, like there's interesting crossovers that at least used to happen a lot more. I feel like the only thing we get now is like Fall Out Boy with Lil Jon or whatever.
Yeah.
Not Lil Jon. I forgot the dude's name.
Little something.
Yeah, it was something like that. But I just remember that was like a whole weird thing. Everyone was like, yeah, I don't think this is working. Wiz Khalifa, that's who it was.
Okay.
And like my version of that was like we would go to like back in the day, it was like a VFW hall. Like you talk to like the random old person that ran it. And we're like, hey, we want to put on a concert. And they're like, what kind of music? Oh, it's it's just like rock and roll, but it's nice. And then what's really going on is like, okay, so there's a grindcore band and a death metal band and a pop punk band and whatever. And like in our hometown, we used to put on shows like that all the time. And it was so fun because like that was when a music scene was just a music scene. It like you could have all the different bands, but the same group of people liked all of them. And it was so awesome. And then like as time went on, it was like, these are all the bands that kind of sound like the Wonder Years. They all have to play together. These are all the Christian metalcore bands that they have to like, and you start watching these people get like divided. And then like the last thing I want to do in the world is watch a show where all the bands sound the same, It just takes the fun out of it.
Yeah, that definitely has happened. I think, unfortunately, I have not attended too many concerts in my life, but like one of the first like big ones I did was Ozfest in like 2002, and that was like in the waning days of nu metal, and literally every band was just the same, and it was just so boring and monotonous. When something like different and unique did come on, like I remember that's when Andrew WK started popping up, and he was on the bill, but everyone hated him because he sounded completely different from all these nu metal bands that were playing. He didn't sound like Mushroom Head or whatever band we can't even think of now. So
Hinder.
So it's you don't get a lot of that kind of like crazy diversity and stuff like that. I think Slipknot kind of caught some, not flack, but like they did something pretty unique, I think, recently with their Knot Fest. They had like Gojira, and then they had some other God, I'm forgetting it now, but they had some other pop act playing and stuff like that. Like they had like kind of like a weird lineup going on, and I think people don't trust it. And especially now, obviously with the pandemic and everything, no one's going to be doing anything not proven once things get rolling again, hopefully in the next 2 years for
yeah, right.
But yeah, it's just so weird that like, because I used to be like that, not hardcore, but metal. I listen to metal.
Yeah.
Like, and then anything that wasn't metal, like it would be a guilty pleasure, and I wouldn't even mention I listened to it or whatever like that.
Also, not to cut you off, but what is your metal?
Oh, that's such a, like, my main band is Metallica.
Okay.
Like that was my entry point. Actually, my entry point was like Load era Metallica.
Hell yeah.
So, and I love it. I love all the Metallica stuff. Like I got into the Load era and then Black Album, and then I kept going back, and I have an appreciation for all that stuff. I even like Saint Anger. Like I like all of it. Is it all like the pinnacle of metal, at the time of its release or whatever? No, but it's good and I enjoy it. But, as I've gotten older, my tastes have, shifted and changed. Like I'm getting more into more death type vocals and stuff like that, and appreciating that stuff. But also I was really into symphonic metal for a while. Stuff like Nightwish and After Forever and stuff like that. So, now it's all just kind of like a mix.
Yeah, because I just love asking people that, because they'll be like, it's the same as like, what are you into? rock. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like,
Well,
what do you mean by that? You know?
I've stated this many times on the podcast. That it's like metal is it's almost its own, you know, classification of music on its own, because there's just so many subgenres that you can consider metal. Like I would say, stuff that's new metal, that's metal, and then stuff that's like slow, doomy, 10-minute song where there's like 15 notes played in the whole song, like that's metal. And then there's like some crazy ass thrash stuff like Power Trip, or that's metal, or something with like Nightwish, operatic vocals and orchestrated synths and stuff like that. That's metal too. Like it's such an all-encompassing thing. So it makes total sense why you're like, well, what is your metal?
Oh, absolutely.
And my metal is slowly becoming kind of like all metal. I can't really get into like the black death metal kind of stuff, the black metal, like the real lo-fi.
Yeah, like where it sounds like it's like, oh, we uncovered this tape from
it sounds
70s.
like it sounds like it was recorded through $10 Walgreens headphones that was mic'd through a trash can. Like it's a lot of fun kind of like playing with that sound.
Yeah.
since all my recording equipment's all digital and all that, so I kind of have like pretty much every sound I want at my fingertips, or I can manipulate or whatever. So it's nice to mess around with that kind of stuff, but like listening to it, I'm like, I kind of need some more. There's kind of like a burgeoning subgenre of death metal, kind of called groove death metal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of becoming more my thing. And I think it's a lot of bands becoming more influenced from like Gojira and bringing in some like even like Pantera type influences into death metal that kind of gives it a little bit more, not so much just all super fast picking and guttural.
But like a bounce and a groove.
Yeah,
to
like
it.
a bounce and a groove to it. So
the reason I ask is because like my metal story is very like it's a roller coaster. But it's funny because I don't know if I imagine you're familiar with Black Dahlia murder.
Yes.
But like as a Michigan kid, like when we were talking about putting on those shows, like in like it was like the Fenton Community Center. This band of Wilhelm Scream, who some would consider like metal punk or something. They're like just super shreddy, awesome music from New Bedford, Massachusetts. They're one of the first like bigger bands that we ever got to like book a show for. And we booked them in our hometown, and it was like the craziest thing. They sold like 45 hoodies in a day. Like everyone in my high school bought them and freaked out. And I remember like we opened the show for them, and I like looked out and I was like, why do I know that guy? And someone's like, dude, the dude from Black Dahlia Murder is watching you guys. And I'm like 17 years old while this is happening. I'm like, what? Okay. So like, we like played as hard as we could and like went for it. And then I went to go talk to him, and I noticed he had one of our shirts on his shoulder, and I was like, what? And he's like, were you in the Swellers? And he like asked me, and I'm like, what? And like I'm like a high school kid at the time too. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, what? Like, do you want stuff? He's like, no, I bought it all. I'm like, what? So what we didn't know is like Trevor from Black Dahlia, who's like just a Detroit dude. He was already a fan of that Wilhelm Scream band. That's why he drove to come out to the show. But he's like a straight up music fan. Like he just loves supporting music, finding new music, like, making his brain do something. And like he gave us his number and we gave him ours, and we're like, whatever. And then the next week he's like, yo, come out to Detroit. I want to take you record shopping. We're like, okay. And then we're like, what the hell's going on? And this is like, they like just signed a Metal Blade, and like they were like starting to get big or whatever. And we went to a record store, and he's like, well, I know you guys are like punk kids, so let me show you some bands that I think you should like that are from the 90s that were probably right before your time. I'm like, okay. So he bought me a Seaweed CD. I don't know if you ever listen to Seaweed, but they're like really awesome stuff. And like he showed us my favorite band, Not a Surf. He got us back into them because he played one of their albums, and we haven't listened to them in forever at that point. We're like, oh my God, they're still doing stuff. And he like just opened our eyes to all this stuff. But the whole time we're like, I thought you were a metal guy. Like, you're not allowed to like other stuff. This is weird. And we went to his house, and it was like 10-foot tall stacks of CDs. And he would like go to the record store and like trade them in. Like, he would get all the CDs on tour, then like sell those and get more CDs and like all this wild stuff. But I remember like I started listening to Black Dahlia as a kind of joke because I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe this music exists. And then over time, I'm like, this is really fast and super interesting because like I could play a punk beat all day, but I can't play a blast beat like that. And I'm like, this is wild. And his voice would go super high and super low and guttural. And then so we like jokingly like started listening to him a lot, then started really loving him, then went to go see him and they were amazing. And then as time went on, and the reason I bring this whole story up is because he was like, oh, we got this new guitarist and he's super into like European metal. Like, I don't know what that means, but that's cool, whatever. And then like out of nowhere, you start hearing this like kind of like bounce and like weird groove stuff in their music. And it wasn't like silly or goofy, but it was like, it just added this whole new element to like the style of what they're doing. And then even though like on paper, people are like, oh, they're just doing death metal, whatever. Like, it's crazy how much like adding a little melodic moment or whatever, it totally like reshifts everyone's focus as far as the music they're listening to, the music they're writing or whatever. And I don't think people realize how much power that has. So like when they would start doing that stuff out of nowhere, it opens the like floodgates of like, here's 1,000 other bands that are from Sweden alone that you might like,
Yeah, it's the depth of just how many bands that are out there and that are really good is just crazy. It's like you can't throw a rock now and just not hit. You can't go on Bandcamp and just like randomly search and not find like a band that's like, holy shit, like these guys are awesome. And it's really cool hearing like just the overall love this guy has of music, and he's just like just a fan, and I think that's something that is not unique to like metal guys, because there's a stereotype of the metal guys being the rough and tough or the
grumpy shitheads.
But in my experience, most of the guys I've met that really love metal are like, yeah, but and then they're also like digging on other stuff. And one of the guys that I know who loves metal up and down, he loves all of it. He listens to like some crazy death metal stuff. He listens to the first Def Leppard albums and everything in between, and then there's like other pop music and rap and stuff. It's all good to him,
Yeah.
And so it's like having this like crazy open-mindedness and just overall acceptance of just like, I just want to jam to some tunes and all that. Like I can't, it's helped, meeting people and hearing stories like this, unlike the ones you told me, that really kept me open, because, I can freely say, hey, if I'm listening to something, it could easily be some, crazy new death metal band I just found, or it could be that new Kelly Clarkson song.
Yeah.
It's good music is good music, whatever gets, whatever, and you learn from it all, and you kind of like, as a musician too, it's like, it's kind of silly to close yourself off, because when you narrow your view so much, you're just going to regurgitate the same things when you're trying to create your own stuff.
And especially early on too, like I started playing drums when I was 9, and I remember like in my early teen years, like that's when I got into like Weezer and like Fat Records and Epitaph punk rock stuff. So I was like, well, obviously the music I have to play is this. And then you just kind of write the song that you heard that you really like. And that was like how it went. And then over time you start listening to more things, and then you go, I like the feeling of this thing mixed with this other thing. And then you go, oh, we accidentally made something. That's cool,
Yeah.
And I think that's so exciting about it, because anyone who's like limiting themselves to like if they're a one-trick pony, like you could sound like someone you admire all day, but like why not be known for you being unique or you being you? Like I think that's so much more important. And that goes like for anything where I've written like, whether it's like a short story or like a comic idea or whatever, and I'm just like, I'm really trying way too hard to sound like Bukowski or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I catch myself in it, and then I'll be like, I don't, that's not me. That's me just like waxing poetic and trying to sound cool or whatever. But then the second you kind of become this weird, like, melting pot of like, this is what I am now. It's everything I've ever liked, and it just comes out naturally. And I think that's what people gravitate towards. So whether you're playing music or you're writing a comic or you're doing whatever, like that to me has so much more social capital and like value than just like, yeah, it's kind of like this.
Yeah. And especially with making comics and writing, and especially with, even with art, it's like you have your influences, the guys you trace and you draw like, and you want to be like them. But then all of a sudden, if you keep your eyes open, this other artist comes along and you're like, oh, I like what they do with this. And you start mixing and matching and you start developing these things. And that's, that's the good stuff, right? A lot of the stuff I like and I listen to is like, I could say, yeah, they're kind of like this, but they do this. And but they do this is always something that's like, not minuscule at all. It's just like, I'm laughing because I bring this band up a lot, and I mentioned I bring up this band a lot, but there's this band called Amaranth, and they're one of my favorite metal bands, but they do like synth, like dancey type stuff. They have like trap type beats. They have 3 different singers. They have a clean singer, a clean female singer, and then like a growly rap guy. And it's all like amazing stuff. They're all really good at what they do. Each one of those singers could front their own band on their own, no problem. But they're all joined together in this weird mishmash of just like heavy riffs and like dancey type beats and grooves and just all this crazy stuff. But I could say, oh, they're like Nightwish, but they do like synthy stuff, and they have, because Nightwish has a female singer and then a male, more growly type singer. But it's such a huge difference, and it's because they've introduced those other influences and stuff like that, and that's the stuff you got to do, right? You can't just, you'll get stale and it'll be stagnant. And I'm glad you brought up, you started drumming when you were 9 and all that, because you've not recently, but you've switched to bass now, correct? Or you've always played bass along with drums?
Like about 5 years ago, I started playing bass in a band or in my own band or whatever.
Baggage, right?
Yeah. And then I recently was like, I want to be drummer again. Like I haven't played bass since COVID started. So I'm like,
okay.
Yeah. But now that you're saying it, I'm like, I miss it.
Well, I went back and I listened to some of the tunes from your bands and all that, and I was like, oh wow, this stuff's really good. Especially, the baggage stuff. I'm like, wow, I'm really digging this.
Thanks, man.
So, don't give it up too much, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things for me where like, I think everyone has that. There's something where it's like, oh, I'm known for this, but I don't want to be known for that. So when Swellers broke up, I was like, oh, I'm going to be the guy that used to play drums in this band. And I'm like, if I'm ever going to do anything, I need to change it up enough to where it's like me. So I was like, okay, so my brother and I wrote these songs. I'll take what made my half of the songs sound like me, and I'll sing them, which I've always wanted to do, and like be like the front man of a band. Cause I was always like project manager for stuff, but I wasn't like, I was also hiding behind a bunch of drums and cymbals in the back of the stage, and then would have to load 50 times more stuff than everyone else in my band. So like that was this cool creative exercise for me where I'm like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to just go for it. And it like was like paying off, and it was cool. But like I realized for the first time in my life, especially like as, we would get really great opportunities, and then people were just like not really stoked on being in the band, and we kept going through members. And it got to the point where I was like, I really love writing songs, but I think I'm trying to compare this success-wise to my previous band, and then that's what's like kind of putting a damper on me being stoked about it, which is a pretty unhealthy thing to do, especially if you're just, if you're living through comparisons and not just like living for the moment, that really kind of bites you in the ass over time. So at the beginning of COVID, we had a tour that was I think it was gonna be in like May or something, and the second it was March, and I just like smelled it happening. I was like, I think this is going to be done for a while. And then exactly what I thought happened. So the last show I played, I think, was in January. And I'm someone who used to, like, the longest I ever went without playing a show was like 2 months, maybe since I was like 14, and I'm 32 now.
Wow.
So that was already a bizarre thing for me, but like I kind of fell back in love with drums, and then I was like, I'm good at drums. I could be stoked on this. I don't know why. So at the beginning of COVID, and I was talking to my friend Hagai about this earlier, where I was like, I have this newsletter, and I'm gonna like do this and like really like push it like Chip Zdarsky does, and then I'm also gonna like be a YouTube drummer, and that's it. That's the new future me. So I like invested in all this recording stuff, and like I was like playing on people's songs and whatever. And then I like ended up being a copywriter for this big like plant-based company based out of Vancouver, and then running or co-running Rootless Coffee, and then doing all this other stuff. So I'm like, okay, that none of that ended up where I thought it was going. But my thing is like I at least try and like go for it and see what happens. And then if it's not that I bail, but like if I don't see a point or a future in something, I'm like, I think we're good.
Well, it's kind of what you have to do to keep moving forward sometimes is, and if you can always hold on to something for a little too long, and then it's, those other opportunities that might have led to the thing where you're going to be most happy are gone.
Exactly.
And so you brought up Rootless, which is the name of the coffee company you co-founded. And if I recall correctly, when COVID hit, that kind of like kickstarted your guys' I guess just kickstarted your plans to either get that going or putting it together. Was this something you guys were planning for a while, or?
So a few months into COVID, my friend Sean Murray, we were both exiting companies, and for varying reasons. And it was one of those things where I was like, I want to just do something creative where I don't have things holding me back. And that being everything from like budget to time to whatever. And then his thing was like, I just want to roast coffee. Like I got my operation ready to go. I just wish I knew like what to do with it. And then we're like, I was calling my friend Dom, who was out to eat with Sean. And I was like, just venting about something. And then Sean was like, hey, we should talk. Like, seriously, I'm trying to do a thing. I'm like, whatever. And then we met up, and I was like, it would just be so cool for like, it could be a company, but like the artwork's actually cool and not stupid. And it's not like brown bags with like boring crap and blah, blah. And then I was like, sorry, I got to stop because I can't not get paid to just blurt out ideas because I've done that my whole life. And then people take them, and then, I still live with not much money. And he's like, you want to work together? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So it like started in August when we were like officially going, and then we already launched in September. So like September 21st. So it was essentially like a month of prep, and then let's go for it.
That's some fast turnaround.
It is so fast. So luckily he had some like product, like green coffee beans, like a few bags of those ready to go. Mm-hmm. And then I was just like, I'm going to reach out to people so as a comic writer and like my musician background, where I was the person who kind of like came up with the album names, song names, and like album concept artwork. Like that was like my favorite thing. So I was like, this is very similar where I can just come up with this cool idea and kind of just run with that, like whatever feels right. That was kind of my mood. So I would try the coffee and I'd go, it'd be cool if we had a thing like this. Who's someone I know that can do a thing like that based on this taste? So, for example, like there's a Colombian roast, and it was like hints of citrus, and it's like kind of weird. And I'm like, yeah, it's like out there. And I'm like, should just be called out there. And I'm like, you know who does out there stuff? Matt Emmons. Let's talk to him. So like, and I had like, just through Twitter, like how I met you and like a few other friends, like I just reached out directly and I was like, yo, you're perfect for this. Look, you want to do it? We could pay you this much. And yeah, super low maintenance, probably won't edit anything. So just let us know. And it like designs started coming in so fast, and we're like, oh boy, this is real, like super fast real. And then we got the stickers made, and then we got like the bags, and we put them on the bags, and we were like, oh, I think this is going to be a big deal. And that was the cool part too, where like we like very soon into it, like we did a collaboration with Flint City Hard Cider, so we had like a coffee hard cider. Then we did we got in the Flint Farmers Market, and our friend Rebecca at Penny's Cafe was like, yo, I'll just sell all your stuff. So like you could go into like the biggest, most populated place in all of Flint, and the one coffee shop has all of our bags of coffee for sale and serves our coffee. That's and awesome. Like, and that was because like there's a Twin Peaks themed one, a damn fine cup of coffee. And the reason it's called that is because when Sean was explaining stuff, he just kept being like, it's just a damn good cup of coffee, And he had no idea what Twin Peaks was. And I was just like, do you realize what you're almost saying every single time? So I showed him the clip, and then me and him like binge watched the show, and we were like, yep, that's it. That's what we got to do. So then my friend Craig Horkey, who's like probably my favorite artist, period. I've known him, again, like a Michigan dude. He's done like show posters for me and like a bunch of other stuff in the past. We've done a few comics together as well. I was like, yo, you're Twin Peaks guy, right? And he's like, it's my favorite show. I'll do whatever you want. We're like, that was easy. So we do the owl from Twin Peaks, but with the body of Agent Cooper. And I remember like showing Rebecca at Penny's Cafe and being like, I don't know if you're into like the show Twin Peaks. And she's like, it's my favorite show. I'm like, really? Like, okay. And then she immediately was like, let's do it. I'll carry all your coffee. And it was because of Twin Peaks, which is also how we got Craig to do the art, which is like, so it's like all of these weird things where I'm like, I think people have just been so tired of like boring whatever coffee companies. And we're running this like a weird DIY punk band. And that's why like things are working out, because for the first time, I'm not like selling music, but there's genres of music that people like. And I'm not selling a comic, but I'm an unknown comic writer and I have a certain style. This is like, you drink coffee, right? Okay, well, this also looks cool. And then people go, sweet. And that's, it's like the easiest sale ever, which is so weird for me.
That's exactly how, I came across you. My buddy Kelly did the artwork for the Dark Roast. And I'm like, well, first of all, you got my interest because anyone who hires Kelly, I'm like, well, they have good taste. Yeah. So, let me see this, let me check this out. And I'm a fan of Dark Roast. If I had to pick a favorite type of coffee, it would be a Dark Roast. And I got a bag, and I'm like, this is like the best Dark Roast. Like, this is awesome. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, my wife's not so much a fan of the Dark Roast, but she even liked that one. And so we got we checked out a bag of the damn fine cup. And that is the most apt name to anything I've ever consumed. It's with the Dark Roast, especially the dark, it's, I can have a cup or two and then I'm good for the day. With the damn fine, I can drink that all day.
That's awesome.
Like it's not something you get tired of or whatever. And, we're not, my wife and I, we're not really picky coffee drinkers. Like, we don't really dig on, like, we're like in that middle section where it's like, we don't really like get like Folgers or Maxwell House, but we're not exactly getting like the premium stuff either. It's like
you're a Lavazza family.
Or Javalia, technically. Yeah. Or what's the other one? Caribou, whatever, even though they're probably overpriced. But but it's like, and the few times we've paid for something more expensive, like Two Brothers, which I think is located out of Chicago, and a few other like more expensive brands or whatever. We're like, yeah, it's good, but I wouldn't like buy this all the time. And with the damn fine, roast, it's like we're trying to figure out like, well, we're kind of cheap, but we want to have this coffee all the time.
Yeah.
and that's the great thing though. But your coffee's not that expensive. It's not, it's like, I remember when I first heard about the Death Wish coffee and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to check that out. Whatever. It's coffee and metal. Let's check it out. And it's like, it was like $20 for a bag, and it was like $8 shipping or something. I'm like, oh, fuck that, man.
Yeah.
And then you guys came, and it's a super fair price for the coffee. And
the thing is, like, what people don't realize is like, it's not just like whatever stuff, like it's really, really high end coffee. And we have this like state of the art, it's called a bellwether roaster. So it essentially looks like a refrigerator. It's self-contained, zero emissions. So we're actually like set up in our friend's photo studio, and like you do 6 pounds of it at a time. So like every single thing we do is like literally roasted to order. Unlike a lot of other places where it's like, here's this massive thing that's going to sit on shelves for a year. Who cares? Like ours is really like, we put a lot of work into this. All of our equipment's super great. And we're paying artists to do really cool stuff. It's not just like, here's this generic whatever. So with all that being said, like we're selling a 12-ounce bag for $15. And in like craft coffee world where all of us worked before, that's cheap. Like where like normally it's like 20 or so bucks. So like, for example, the Berry Kiss, which the wonderful Emily Pearson did the artwork for, that one is like, that's my favorite one we do. It's an Ethiopian. It literally tastes like just berries and sweetness, and it smells like Fruity Pebbles, which is so cool. But you don't want to hear a coffee guy talk about that. But for me, the idiot, it's great. But like with the other stuff, where we're like, even like our dark roast, like it's really high quality stuff, just roasted darker. So essentially, it's like a version of the damn fine, but a darker version. And it's not like burn your mouth, like it just tastes like char. Like it's still smooth. And then the damn fine is like very smooth. And for some people that think it's like too light, but like where we're from, as far as like coffee and stuff, like it was only light roasts. So it was like, which version of a different light roast do you like? And then we had that talk where we saw what Death Wish was doing. We saw what Bones Coffee was doing. And we're like, we can brand to whatever we want. Like we just make really cool looking stuff. You don't know what a coffee tastes like when you order it. You just think it looks cool or it sounds cool, So we're like, let's literally run with that and then surprise the hell out of people when it's actually good. Because there's been times in the past where I'll be at a grocery store and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. And I'm like, oh, I gave it a shot and we're good. Like, let's not have to do that anymore. But now it's like, I literally only drink our coffee. But if I'm traveling, my favorite thing in the world, which obviously it's bizarre with COVID stuff, but like we went to 6 different grocery stores to like set up our coffee display, which is insane. So like now Rootless is in Metro Detroit in 6 different grocery stores. But we stopped at a place called Desert Oasis in Royal Oak. And my friend Jack was working there, and they're like just a super good barista. And I got like a perfect pour over and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I could appreciate it. And as a company, we're like, if your company morally doesn't suck ass, we will totally support you and promote you all day. But like, there are just so many weird, sketchy people in the coffee game. And our whole thing was like, let's not be that, because everyone has these like ulterior motives and everything's bizarre. And us, we're just like, we're a bunch of scrappy weirdos who just want people to be stoked.
Well, that's awesome. I really liked hearing like just all the nuances what you guys do, like the smaller batches and stuff like that. And I'm sure your friend's photo studio smells amazing, like 24/7. And I definitely am, I'm definitely a customer for life at this point, because I'm just like, even, if I choose no other roast, just the damn fine. It's just, it's like the perfect coffee just to be drinking all day. It's, and this is not a paid endorsement.
Checks in the mail.
I'm literally paying you because I'm getting ready to order. We're getting ready to just bite the bullet and order the giant 5-pound bag and just be done with it.
Dude, yes. By the way, I hope like, so we have this dude that does our like Instagram and Facebook advertisements. Like he's like a big like e-commerce dude, and he was like, "What's that bag in the photo like on your Instagram?" We're like, "Oh, it's like a wholesale for a local bar." He's like, "Sell it." I'm like, "What do you mean sell it?" He's like, "Put it online. Who cares?" I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Because if you sell one, you just sold a lot of coffee. And how much did it cost you to do that?" We're like, "Nothing extra." He's like, "Exactly." We're like, "Okay." So now we have a 12 ounce, 2.2 pounds, and 5 pounds.
Yeah, my wife and I are doing the math. Like, if we order 5 pounds, is that enough for a month? Like, how much do we go through in a week?
Well, my move is just pour hot water in it and then just put a straw in it, and you're good.
There you go. You just just keep it warm all month. That's all.
Exactly.
It'll be good. It'll be good. It'll be fine. But no, that's just when I started this podcast, I'm like, I started with the intent of just initially talking to my creative friends and having an excuse, and comics, coffee, metal, or something that so many of us just love. Like that's just, something that's in all our little Venn diagrams that match up. But, once I saw you guys come out, and then, I, befriended you on Twitter and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to this guy, because not only is he roasting awesome coffee, he's a comic writer and he's a musician. It's like, you are like the perfect guest. Like I can't
That's
imagine.
what I always tell people. I'm like,
I can't imagine a more appropriate guest for this podcast at all. So with that, I have to ask you, Jono, comics, coffee, metal, what are you digging right now?
Well, comics, I just finished the 3 trades or whatever. I don't know what he specifically calls them for his thing, but I'm a huge Matt Fraction fan.
Okay.
And I just read November, the 3 first books of that, and it's so weird and good. My friend Hagai was telling me about it, and he said it's just like it's exactly what I want. Because you're reading it, you don't know what the hell's even going on, and then the more you go, the more payoff you get, and it's just like really interesting art. So I'm super into that. As far as other comics, I just read The Scumbag from Rick Remender, and just the first issue of that. But I'm a huge Remender fan, and he's a punk rock dude, so I'm a big fan of that. And then I'm like looking on my shelf while I'm talking. Usually it's like any like Jeff Lemire stuff. I'm a huge fan of just like weird and dark, without being like tropey. And I feel like having like I oddly relate to that, where it's like I have a sense of humor and I'm an idiot, but like there's this like lingering darkness in all people where we're like, you could still like have the jokes cracked and whatever, but like it's like serious situations going on. So I'm a huge fan of like that kind of storyline. So like Black Hammer is super good. And I feel like there's one more that I recently read. I'm a huge Ed Brubaker fan too, so I'm like slowly, now that I actually know how to buy stuff on Comixology, I'm like going back and going nuts with that. I'm looking at my room and I realize how many comics I have in like different piles on the floor and on my shelves, where I'm like, this is my to read section that I forgot about. But like I didn't read comics for, I feel like it was like a month, because I've just been so damn busy with stuff. And then when I want to like wind down, I like literally completely shut my brain off, and it'll be like, I've been watching a bunch of TV and stuff. So it'll be like Lovecraft Country. We're rewatching Curb Your Enthusiasm, because you gotta. And then as far as what was it? Metal and coffee. That was the other one.
Oh yeah, coffee. I think the coffee question has been answered, but if you want to be more specific, go for it.
So there's this company called Rootless Coffee.
Oh, really?
And they're making such sick stuff. So I'm actually like obsessed with their damn fine cup of coffee and the Ethiopian. We're also working on some new roasts, so I get to like experiment with that stuff, which is cool. And I'm also a monster person, so just like it is with like food with, you know, when people are done, where I'm like, I'll put it all in one bag and have like a leftover bag of whatever. And it gets the job done, which is great.
Oh, yeah, we do that all the time.
Yeah, you got it. And then I'm also like a very big proponent of espresso. So like if I go to a place, that's my order. It's just a double shot of espresso on ice, and the ice slowly melts, and it's like an Americano without like watering down stuff, but it just like I'm a slow sipper, like a whiskey guy. Okay. So that's super nice. And then so obviously, you know, Rootless, it's the only good coffee company, and I hate every other one. And then Metal, so Trevor from Black Dahlia just posed for a post with our Rootless bags, and I was like, oh shit, they had a new album that just came out, and I totally forgot. It's called Verminous, and it's so good. They've just been getting better and weirder and cooler, and like Brian the guitarist and Alan the drummer, like I've known those dudes for a long time, and I just because they're so funny and weird, I forget that they're legitimately amazing at what they do. So that's super cool. And then as far as like other, like say subgenres of metal, if you want to call it that, I'm super into, there's a band called Metz, METZ. They're probably in my like top 10 favorite bands right now. It's, people kind of say it's like an unfiltered Nirvana without the like pop elements. It's just like anger and dissonance and weirdness, but there's like kind of that groove in it too. So when it comes to like kind of punky alternative stuff, like I'm usually really into that world. I just made a playlist called Heavy and Weird, and I was like listening through all the songs again where I'm like, man, I'm a psycho, this is cool. So like the new album from Daughters was really cool. It's like, they used to be just like a grindcore weirdo band, and then they became this like gothy industrial band out of nowhere, but like
really?
It's so good, and they were amazing live when I saw them. And then as far as like other stuff, like I'm a big Drive Like Jehu fan. Like because I'm a drummer, I'm really into like strange rhythms, and like I love when people play guitar like it's not a guitar, and that's like a huge like musical turn on for me. Where it's like where you play it like in a rhythmic way rather than just, you know, a melodic way, I guess. So yeah, I'd say number one right now is probably Metz, though. That I love that band.
Awesome. You know, I consider myself pretty well-rounded when it comes to like knowing about bands and having an open ear and belonging to some different metal forums on Facebook and all that. Like I, you know, think like I have a good knowledge, but every time I speak to somebody, they're like, oh man, I really love these guys and this band. I'm like, I have never heard of these people before in my life. So it's always, you know, real fun to like, okay, let me write this down or realistically listen back to this episode when I'm editing it and like, okay, who is this band again? I gotta go check out. Cause so Metz. All right. I'm definitely going to check this out with that
METZ. They're just so good. And like, it's funny for me because like, I think the punk kid in me, like I always lean more alternative than I do metal. But like you said, you know, there's so many like genres and subgenres of it.
Yeah. It's like, there's stuff that could be, someone might say, no, this is just like alternative kind of stuff. And then someone's like, no, this is really metal. There's a band called Loathe that's really good. And there's some other songs where it's like, it could straight up just be considered like an alternative, like a heavier alternative song. And then there's stuff there it's just like full on, there's no way in hell anyone's mistaking this for metal. But if you only listen to that one song, you'd be like, oh no, they're alternative or whatever. So it's, you know, it kind of feeds into why I love metal so much, is because there's just so much variety that, you know, it's just something for every mood.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we've talked about music, we've talked about coffee, and now I want to talk to you a little bit about your comics work. From my understanding, you're fairly, new into releasing comics. Am I correct in assuming that, or am I
Yeah.
just?
Yes,
And
I was going to say fairly new is a good assessment of it.
so, when it comes to just like creativity and stuff like that, what kind of just drove you to wanting to write comics? Was it something that just like you had an idea one day and you're like, I guess I got to write this? Or was it just something you always kind of wanted to do, but your other endeavors kind of just took precedence for, whatever you were planning?
I think it was, I thought about this a lot the last few years. So one of my favorite parts of being in a band, like I was mentioning earlier, was like orchestrating the visual identity of our band and our albums. So one of the first times I really got to kind of flex that, like in my head, I always had this weird like magic to everything I did. Like I added a lot of feeling and like I don't know how to describe it, but it's stuff that probably didn't pay off for anyone else, but for me, it felt really good. So, like for example, we did an album with or album artwork from Ben Sears, who's a really rad comic
Mm-hmm.
artist now too. And he was like a drummer of a hardcore band and just did like band art. That was like how we started. Um, but also his stuff's on Koyama Press if anyone wants to check it out. And freebensears.com is the site. But in 2013, our final album as our band, Swellers, we did this really cool black and white, like essentially it was like a comic feeling thing. And I had this whole concept and it was, I just like was really diving deep into it. But just like all music things, there was a limited budget, and it was like, I would love to do this, like, essentially like a fold out. So it's like the story, but just in images. And I would like write what the images and the scenes were and blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, actually, this is your budget. So how about we just get 4 random photos and that's it, or 4 illustrations? I'm like, sure. So he did it. And I just kept like being obsessed with that. And I had this, it's like the same feeling when you write a song, you record it and then you listen back and you keep listening back and you're like, I made a thing. Feels so good. So while all of that was going on, I started writing as a music journalist. So I was writing for Alternative Press, Noisy, which is part of Vice. And that was like my supplementary income while I was on the road. So I started off as like a blogger style person, and then I started doing that. And I started interviewing people and telling other people's stories. And I really loved that. And then I was like, I really like writing a lot and I really like creating these things. And I was like, why haven't I tried fiction? Like I could actually like create a thing and be in control of it and not have to like do this extra research and whatever. So I started writing like short stories down, whatever. And then my friends, Kyle Figley and Sam Moore, I kind of reached out to them because I'm like, I know you're comic guys. Get me into it. Each of them gave me a stack of comics, fell in love with all this stuff. And like as a kid, I read Spawn and I like was obsessed with like the 90s stuff. But it was more so like I'm action figure guy. And then I got really into wrestling. And I always like my thing was if there's some kind of like human shaped animal thing that like fights crime or something, I was probably into that too. And I had all the toys. So I always just had like a larger than life, outlook on the world, and like Spider-Man was my dude. And I also am saying this out loud. One day I want to write a Shocker miniseries really bad for Marvel. So, if you're ever listening to this, no one in the world wants that, but I want to do it, and I know everyone's going to love it. So anyway, I always post about like once a year, I'll like post like a thing about Shocker, and people are like, why? I'm like, cause he's so cool and I'll make everyone love him. So anyway, so then how it finally started happening was, because I'm Mr. Project Manager and I'm always just like, I want to do this. I'm going to try it. Who cares? So all my friends were like, I wish I could do comics. I wish I could write comics or do the art or do whatever. So I got 5 artists, 5 writers, including me, paired them together. And I was like, we are going to do a Flint Water Crisis charity comic. So we're all going to dedicate our time. We're all going to get completed stories. So we have to stop saying, I wish I could do this, because we are doing it. And we're going to go and make this a reality. So I went out and like I talked to a bunch of people. I literally got paid advertisements like it was like a school yearbook or something. And then Source Point Press, our friend Els, they work there as well, but they were like, yo, we'll publish it if you want. And we're like, yeah, that'd be sick, without realizing, oh my God, that means actually releasing it in stores. So, we're like all super stoked on it and everything, but like technically my first comic was like nationally released, like distributed, which is insane. So we ended up raising like, at least just locally from our first batch of it, over $3,000. And it's for a Flint charity that helps adults with disabilities. And that was how I would operate, where I'd always do things it would be a charity situation. So like it would raise awareness. People would dedicate their time. The thing would get done because there was a reason to do that thing. And then after that, I was like, oh shit, now I got the itch. So my friend Mark Bouchard let me do a story with Craig, who did not only A Damn Fine Cup of Coffee, but the comic and Hope a Comic for Flint. And then we did a story in Everything is Going Wrong, which is actually about the band Baggage falling apart. So then that was my second thing I got to do. And both of them are shorts. And then I went to Heroes Con because everyone was like, it's a great way to meet creators. So I like wandered around, talked to a bunch of people at tables. And then my friend Liana Kangas was like, yo, you need to talk to Matt Emmons. So I was like, okay, what's up? And I'll get you Starbucks if you want it. I'm just hanging out all week and I have nothing to do. And then we hit it off super well. And then we did a comic called Monster Bounty together, which is like my first like actual comic artist doing all this stuff with like real lettering and all this. And I was like, oh, this is sweet. Then I got like, okay, I could also write like way over the top stuff. Because essentially I saw The Mandalorian and I went, I'm going to guess what I want that to be. And I'm going to write it. Because I like Boba Fett's like my dude. And essentially anyone with a mask, I'm super stoked on. So, I'm stoked on everyone during COVID. So then we did, so essentially I've been doing these like little mini bursts of stuff. And then the two recent big ones, one of them is, it's a project called The Inevitables. So it's Vinny from Less Than Jake and essentially like a ska super group. He reached out and was like, yo, I want you to write a comic for this concept I have. So it was like a really loose concept, like death is inevitable. And here's like teenagers and stuff. And I'm like, cool. And then I created this whole world out of nowhere and like named him after like people from my childhood and like made this weird, essentially it's like Weirder Umbrella Academy. But like, I guess not weirder, but like more street level, but just like strange characters. And I was like, I really love Deadly Class and I love these like ensemble cast style things. So I want to do that. So I finally got to work officially with Liana Kangas. So she did all the art for that. And then Cardinal Ray did the letters. Fabian Lele did the layouts. So we got like a full on legit comic crew. And that's going to be my technically first full issue of a comic that's coming out. So we're still getting the finishing touches. So it's November. So it'll probably be out in a year. Who knows? But that's eventually coming out. And then, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you're doing it like first off, you went out, you start off with a bang with the Flint anthology, and then, but you're doing what so many people say is like what you have to do. You write the shorter stories, you get comfortable doing that, and then eventually you start branching out into full issues because myself included, a lot of people do like, I'm going to start with this magnum opus, and then when it's never ending and you don't have that finished thing like you gathered your friends to do, it just seems like, well, I'm never really doing anything, am I? If it's not a finished thing. So I think that's really cool. I have a follow-up question to Inevitables, but go on with what you were saying. It can wait.
Oh, sure. The last one was like the quick version was, um, my friend Matt Miner asked me to be in Maybe Someday, which is a really cool anthology being put out by A Wave Blue World. That just came out in stores, so now that's my technically second like Diamond distributed comic, and that's my first time on Comixology, which is really exciting too. Um, so I did a story with my friend Sebastian Perez, who I met from being paired with him or whatever. But I don't know if you're familiar with the band The Weaker Thens at all. But it's like one of my favorite, like I guess just like indie folky bands. Uh, and they have a trilogy about this cat and the singer's cat, and it's like super emotional. So I wrote a story called Support Animals that's like essentially like a happy Black Mirror episode, but about a guy and his cat. So I've been like dipping around where it's like super action adventure, really serious, and then like that one is like one of the more serious, like heartfelt ones. And then I'm also working on a pitch right now, which is like a super strange horror Twin Peaks style thing.
That's cool. You're hitting all the bases and scratching all the genre itches that we all get. Because I can say, like, as an artist, like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this, but it takes so much more time to like actually like figure it out and then do it, that I've heavily been considering jumping in the writing myself, just because make someone else do all the do the heavier lifting, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's real cool to see like and hear like this kind of trajectory you're taking, and I'm hearing a lot of very familiar names to myself. Like I just had Matt Miner on the show, and I've known Matt for a few years. He's really great, and the anthologies he puts together with Eric Palicki are excellent, and they're both excellent writers in their own right. But they've if they just went and just edited anthologies for the rest of their time, like they would do a lot of really great stuff continuing on from there. And I definitely want to check out some of these stories you're talking about, especially The Inevitables, because that sounds really awesome. And I know Liana a little bit from Twitter and all that, and her art's really cool and like kinetic, and just like has that real cool almost like there's like a radical coloring style and stuff like that. Is she coloring it, or is someone else coloring that?
Liana is, yeah.
Okay.
And it's so good. Like the colors are like 10 times, because like the inks were already rad, and then the second we got the colors, we're like, oh, there's Liana. You know what I mean? Because it's really interesting, like an artist like having that be the thing, but it brings so much out in what she's doing. And her palette is it just reminds me of like 80s roller skates, which is awesome.
Yeah. And just to go back real quick, when I mentioned like artists doing heavy lifting, I just mean like time wise, because it takes us longer to draw things than it does to write things sometimes.
I mean, that's not true. Artists or writers do all the work.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's no diss to writers, because having written some stuff on my own, there's been days where it's just like you're trying to get that one sentence right, and you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and then you'd rather be drawing 1,000 horses running, through a crowded city, so as opposed to just trying to figure out this dialogue. So I actually did a whole podcast on it.
Because I was about to say, as a writer, I don't think that's true. So
where I rambled on basically saying it's all hard, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, artists definitely do the grunt of the work, because it's like, here's this loose concept and like this is how it flows, and then it's like, all right, now piece all of it together and also make it look exactly how I want. But guess, like there's so much extra that as an artist, I'm sure but like there's so much extra, and I hope people always appreciate the importance of artists and comics, because that's what makes them comics.
Yeah, it's really the collaborative effort of everybody, and all right. Back to what I was going to say though. Guys, just so don't piss off any of the writers. I don't want the typewriter monkeys mad at me anymore. No. Yeah, that's a good way to go down. So with The Inevitables, there's also a soundtrack involved. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Soundtracks to music and comics is something I'm a ginormous fan of. I think it's happening more and more lately too, which is really cool. And the that like extra, I guess, creative energy that kind of surrounds a book when there's like music written for it and like involving the characters and like all that. So when the soundtrack for that was being formed, was that like after you had given them like the world you built and the stuff like that? Was that informing the songs, or is it something like we have this idea and we have these songs, now flesh it out?
It was kind of they were happening in parallel without really influencing one or the other, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So pardon me. So Vinny was like, yo, we've been demoing songs, blah, blah, blah. And he sent them to me. And I listened once and I went, oh, I get it. Cool. And then I made my own like kind of like scrappy punky playlist that like went along with those songs, if that makes sense. Like it like lives in that same world, so I could kind of like extend that feeling. So essentially it was like, here's this loose concept, and then the comic reinforces that concept and adds more context to it. So it's exciting because like people are like, oh, is it like a Pink Floyd thing? And I'm like, not really, but like also if you get high enough you could do anything, so who cares?
Is that something you kind of see yourself doing for like your own project, like masterminding your own soundtrack for your from the scratch story or anything like that?
Yes, and it's already it's already in the works. Yeah.
Awesome.
So there's been actually, which adds another one. So there's two different things. One of them is a pitch that's been floating around for a bit, but there's music involved. And then the other one is like a short comic with a song. I just have to like finish tweaking a thing and send it to the artist. Sorry, I was yawning at that point. It's been a long day.
No worries.
It probably sounded like I cut out, but I was like,
it's the perils.
Yeah,
it's the perils of saying, "Hey guys, I can only record this podcast, after my kids are down sleeping." Everyone's. There's a couple yawns in every episode. I think some are heard, some aren't. It's fine.
No, mine's like I was saying, we did the like deliveries of 6 different cities for grocery stores for coffee today, and then I went from that into like job number 2, and then I'm like, oh man, I'm sitting, this feels so good.
By the end of this conversation, it's just going to be on the other side snoring. And
I always wonder if that's a thing.
There is a podcast that one of the hosts did fall asleep during recording. It's very funny. It's the 11 o'clock comics podcast. It's a fairly popular podcast. I'm a big fan of it because it's online community kind of connected to me to a lot of people I consider friends now and collaborators and stuff. And just, they have very long episodes, so they kind of go deep into the night when they're recording. And just one episode, one of the hosts just fell asleep, and you can kind of hear him kind of snoring softly in the background, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, is he asleep?"
Oh my god!
And he's left it in. It was hilarious, and it was one of those things where it's like, especially in the context of it, it's just 4 friends who are very knowledgeable about comics and stuff like that. Just talking and having great conversations about it. But yeah, it was just very much like, it was just a hilarious thing. So yeah, it's happened.
Yeah, because like, especially there's like the back and forth of, and I'm sure you have friends in your everyday life that do it too, where you'll be talking to someone and they're just really excited to say the thing that they've been thinking, and they're not listening to anything that you're saying. Like I have a few friends that are like that, where they're probably never going to listen to this anyway. But I'll be talking to them and I watch their eyes start kind of like looking around the room, and I'm like, you're literally just waiting for a pause so you could say whatever you're thinking. So I just start like saying anything, and it just ends up happening. So I'm like, I will listen to, as someone who's been on like a lot of podcasts over the years, and I like was on one with the Inevitables guys for a bit. Like you could very easily tell if people are like, let's play who sounds smart or let's have a conversation, you know? And I feel like if you're playing, let's see who sounds smart, that's when you fall asleep.
Yeah.
you're like, I'm not, there's no information coming out of whoever's talking to me. All it is background noise. And then you're like, man, what did I have to eat today? And then there's a pause and you're like, oh shit.
Well, on behalf of the 11 O'Clock Comics guys, I will note that they also imbibe on a few drinks during their, at the time, they had a few drinks during the recording. So that might have guided along any relaxation that may have happened there. But yeah, I totally get it. And there's definitely people, I think everyone knows those people who are just waiting for their turn to talk. And sometimes, you know, I might be guilty of it myself from time to time, where it's just like you have that thought that's just all encompassing and you're like, I got to say this. And you're not trying to be rude to the other person, but you're just like, I have to say this before I forget this thing. And I want to tell you this thing. But whatever you're saying right now is this is not registering to me. But, and then there's people who are just don't care about other people's thoughts and feelings and they just want to talk. So,
which is so kind.
So, one thing I also wanted to ask about is since you are a musician and all that, something that like a lot of artists talk about, or you know, the stereotype of the artist talking about is like we always talk about our brushes and what do we use and what brush do you use and what ink do you like, what paper is your favorite, and while those are still conversations I eat up with a spoon, I also love talking about what kind of gear people have and what they use. So when I saw that you were, because I was like, oh, he's a drummer, cool. You can talk a little bit about drums and all that. And then I saw that you're playing bass and baggage and all that. I'm like, oh crap! Like, so I have to, you know, I'm like, I have to ask him about these basses because you had some, you know, in the videos I saw, you had some pretty nice looking stuff. So were those, you know, do you currently own any basses, or was it just kind of stuff you were using as you're, you know, with the band, or?
So my basement is funny because it's one of my band's Braided Veins. There's like a lot of their amps and stuff like still like just chilling by the wall. So I have like a Marshall JMP and like these half stacks and an Emperor cab and all this like wild stuff. But I've been like actually collecting my own gear for a while now, which is cool. So as far as basses, I have a custom Nash bass. My friend Britton Nash is just an insane guitar builder. And through the band Against Me, we met him, and he was very gracious to make something for me. And I'm a huge fan of Surf Green. So I was like, yo, I've always wanted this. And then my brother was like, what if you made it sunburst under and then it's surf green on top and it's like relic so you see the sunburst through it? And I was like, shit, that's a really cool idea. So I ended up doing that, and it's like one of my favorite, it's probably my favorite piece of gear, honestly. And then I have a Fender, it's a P bass, but it was like a 50th anniversary of something, like some kind of reissue or something. But the funny story behind that, I got it from a Guitar Center employee only auction, and they essentially built this like sketchy version of eBay. And it was like almost immediately my friend that worked there was like, if you scroll to the back, no one is bidding on anything. Did you notice that? And I'm like, oh God. So I was like, go to P bases and go to the last page. So he did. And I was like, put $300 on there just to see. And I won it. So I won an American made Fender brand new precision P bass. And then, yeah, I just got to keep it for $300.
That's awesome. I think that was in one of the videos. I think it was like almost like a Mustang style body.
Hello?
If I recall. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello, hello. 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 Hello.
Yo.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, for some reason my mic got muted. That was weird. Sorry.
Are you good?
Yeah. So take it back to so I think that bass you're talking about, it was like a Mustang style body, I think. If I recall correctly. I'm trying to imagine the basses I saw in the videos you were playing, and
They're
all
P
kind of-
basses.
That's P bass. Okay.
And then the thing you saw was probably the J Mascis Jazz Master.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, all the shapes are melding in my brain. But
Yeah.
that sunburst surf green deal you're talking about is like, if back in the day, like anything that wasn't like a black or like gray guitar, I'm like, whatever, that's stupid. That looks ridiculous. And now I'm like, I see like these like crazy neon green, like hot pink metal guitars, and like these like super tough guys or these like super like heavy guys are like playing these crazy ass colors, and I'm like, those things look kind of awesome.
Oh yeah, dude, I love especially like really wanky like Ibanez looking ones. Like the dude that owns Reverend Guitars, he has a collection of just like the wildest like Japanese Ibanezes. Like it'll be like bright pink or like weird dragons painted on them and all this wild stuff. And I'm like, that's so gross, but I want it so bad. Like even like Phoebe Bridgers plays like a BC Rich or something like that, and I'm like, it works. I don't know why.
Or even like the Saint Vincent.
Oh man, I love it.
Signature guitar. Like when I first saw that thing, I'm like, ugh, God, that thing looks so ridiculous. And then I forget what color I saw it in, but I think it was like a sparkle black or something like that. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I need that guitar. That thing is freaking amazing. And I think I had the same reaction to like Gibson put out these. They call it the Modern V but modern with the E at the end. And it basically looks like the Star Trek insignia.
Yeah.
And it got roasted so hard online when they released these things, and it was some sort of like anniversary reissue of some old, spacey version of the V that they did. And I remember when I saw it though, I was instantly like, wow, that's the Star Trek. That's a Star Trek guitar, man. I need that thing. But of course, it's a Gibson. It's a Gibson guitar, so it's like drastically overpriced. But
do you remember the Robo tuner one?
Oh God, yeah. That stuff was just.
So I was working at Guitar Center when that got launched, and I think it was like I think it was the 2015 models.
Well, hold on a second. We've gone this long, and you're just telling me now you worked at a Guitar Center.
Oh hell yeah!
All right, this podcast is gonna be like 50 hours long. I have so many questions, but please continue.
I was gonna say it's probably gonna be 9 more minutes long because I'm gonna pass out.
Yeah.
And I'm a very slow drinker, and I had an IPA that I've been drinking for 2 hours, and I'm not even done with it. But I'm like, dude. So yeah, I was working at Guitar Center when they launched the Gibson Robo Tuner or robotic guitar, whatever they call it. Or no, it wasn't the robotic guitar. That was separate. This was just literally the Robo Tuners. And they thought it was going to be this big thing that helped all these people. But essentially it was like, do you not want to have to tune your guitar? Do these 50 extra steps that takes way longer to change your strings and do all these little things. And it went so poorly that Gibson had to actually pay a person to travel to all the Guitar Centers to remove that from their guitars just so they could liquidate them and still sell them.
Oh God.
That's how like badly those were, because they thought that was going to be like the standard. Like, this is the future. I'm like, nope, this is bad and no one wants that.
Yeah, Gibson made so many bad moves. They seem to be on the right track again based on the 50 different guitar YouTubers I watch, but yeah, they definitely made some huge missteps. But all joking aside, we have been talking for quite a bit, and you are an hour ahead of me, so you do need to go get some rest to continue making the awesome coffee and the awesome comics and the awesome music. So I'm gonna end the show now. I appreciate you coming on, Jono. I had a great time talking to you. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I really appreciate it. If you want to let everybody know in internet land, where they can find you, where they can pick up your stuff, where they can check out all the cool stuff you do.
Sure. So I am on Twitter and Instagram at Jono Diener, JONODIENER. My site is jonodiener.com. And you can check out Rootless Coffee at rootlesscoffee.com for all of our cool holiday deals.
Awesome. And like I said, I think Jono just tweeted it, but I literally just bought a 5-pound bag as we were talking, because after describing the coffee on the podcast, I'm like, you know what, I got to pull the trigger and make sure I have this coffee every single day in my life right now. So,
and I love you and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Enjoy the coffee for the next week or so, the 5 pounds.
Oh man, I don't need sleep.